Hi again. In this video, we're going to go more in detail into the logical connectors, and, or, and if then. So let's start with and. An and statement is also called a conjunction. Think of conjoining, you're putting two things together. And an and statement is true only when both of the statements connected by the and are true. So when both of the statements are true. If either one of them or both of them are false, then the and statement is false. Okay, so what we're trying to do is determine the truth value of the entire statement. Okay, so determine whether each and statement is true or false. Rabbits are fish. I'm going to underline them. Rabbits are fish and rattlesnakes have 4 legs. So it can be helpful to look at each one first and then look at the compound statement. So rabbits are fish. I don't think that's true last time I checked. So I'm going to write a false little f there. That's false. And rattlesnakes have 4 legs. No, I don't think they have any legs. So that is also false. So if both false and false, this whole statement is false. Okay, so to the right here is the value for the whole statement, the and statement. Let's do another one. Math 105 is a PCC class. Okay, that is true. You are probably taking it right now. And Portland Community College is located in Oregon. Okay, that is also true. Portland, Oregon. So now we have a true and a true. So both are true. Our complete statement, our compound statement is true, or our conjunction is true. Okay, a third example. Oprah Winfrey and Bill Clinton were U.S. presidents. So again, this is a little shortcut way of writing it. Was Oprah Winfrey a president? No, that's false. At least not as of this video. And Bill Clinton, was he a U.S. president? Yes, he was a U.S. president in the 1990s. So so with an and, both of them have to be true, right? The and means both. So Oprah Winfrey was not a president, so this complete statement is false. Okay, so with an and, both of them have to be true. Okay, it's like if someone sent you to the store to get eggs and milk, they're expecting you to get both of them, right? Okay, so then that's different from an or statement. So an or statement is also called a disjunction. And in everyday life, so or statements can be interpreted in 2 different ways. As inclusive, meaning either or both, or exclusive, meaning either but not both. Okay, so let me show you a couple examples so you can see what I'm talking about. So determine whether each or statement is inclusive or exclusive. Will you have the vegan or meat option at dinner? So are they asking you if you want either or both, or just one of these 2? Just one, right? You're only going to eat one meal. And if you're vegan, you're not going to eat the meat option. If you're meat, you may or may not eat the vegan. But this is so not both, but just one. So this is an exclusive or. Okay. We want to hire someone who knows spreadsheets or QuickBooks. Okay, now they want someone who knows either one of these, but could someone know both? And would that be okay? Yeah, I think having both skills would probably be even better. So this means either or both. So this is an inclusive or. Okay, so in logic and mathematics, the or is inclusive unless specified otherwise. So in English, we often mean the exclusive, or it depends on the situation. So pay careful attention to this, because in logic and math, usually the or is inclusive. Okay, you have to say that it's not if it's exclusive. Okay, so now that we've talked about inclusive and exclusive or, let's talk about when or statements are true and false. Okay, so an or statement is true when one or both of the statements are true. So only one of them has to be true this time. But also both could be true. If both statements are false, then the or statement is false. Okay, so I have the same propositions put together with ors instead of ands now. So let's look at each example here. Rabbits are fish. We already said that was false. Or rattlesnakes have 4 legs. That is false. So false or false. So neither one of these are true. So this is still false with an or in it. Math 105 is a PCC class. That's true. Or PCC is located in Oregon, and that was true. So when both are true, it is true. One or the other, or both. Oprah Winfrey or Bill Clinton were U.S. presidents, or maybe you should say was a U.S. president. I don't know how you say that properly. Oprah Winfrey was not, but Bill Clinton was. So one or the other was a president, so that is true. So that's the difference between the and the or, is when one of them can be true. And it could be either order, right? We could have said Bill Clinton or Oprah Winfrey. The order doesn't matter. So as long as one of them is true, an or is true. Okay, great. Well, let's go on to if-then statements. An if-then statement is also called a conditional statement. And because that if we're conditioned, the second part is conditional on the first, right? So if the animal is a bird, then the animal has a beak. Okay, so we're saying if the first thing happens, then the second thing happens. Or if the first thing is true, then the second thing is true. Okay, the if part is called the hypothesis. And the then part is called the conclusion. Okay, hypothesis, because that's what may or may not be true, but if we're saying if that's happening, then the conclusion is going to happen. Okay, so let's practice that. In this one, let's determine the hypothesis and conclusion. You'll be paid overtime if you work more than 10 hours today. Okay, so I'm going to find the if, right? And then I would also look for the then, but there's no then in here. So what's going on? If you work more than 10 hours a day, then you'll be paid overtime, right? So this can be written in either order. The if part could be second and the then part would be first. So it's kind of like then would go right here if we switched it, but we didn't have to, they didn't have to write it because they reversed the order. So the hypothesis could come second in the sentence. If you work more than 10 hours today. So I'm going to say if you work more than 10 hours today, that is the hypothesis. Then is the conclusion, you will be paid overtime. Notice these individually each are propositions. They're each complete sentences that make a claim. Okay, let me pause it while I switch to the next page. Okay, so let's continue with our if-then statements, and let's determine when they are true or false, okay? So an if-then, or a conditional statement, is false when the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. Okay, so notice I'm talking about when it's false, and that's because there's only one time when an if-then statement can be false. It's true for all other situations. Okay, so let me show you an example of this because I think that'll help make more sense. Okay, so here's an example. Let's say you make this statement. If I get elected, I will reduce college tuition. Okay, so this could be to the PCC board or whatever you're getting elected to. If I get elected, I'll reduce college tuition. Okay, so you're saying if I get elected, I will do this. That's your campaign promise. So there's two cases. First, let's take the hypothesis if that's true. So let's say first you do get elected. Okay, now the first time, let's say if you get elected and then you do reduce college tuition. Okay, so you got elected, you did reduce college tuition. That's a true statement. You met your campaign promise. Okay, so I'm going to say, just to remind you, you met your promise. But if you get elected and you don't reduce college tuition, then the statement is false. So you haven't met your promise. Okay, so this is the only way that it's false. Okay, so now let's say the other case. So now let's say if the hypothesis is false, you don't get elected. Okay, so you don't get elected, and the statement was, if I get elected, I will reduce college tuition. Well, you didn't say anything about what you would do or not do if you didn't get elected. So we say this entire statement is not false because you didn't say anything about what you would do if you weren't elected. So it is true. So it's kind of like a double negative here. You didn't, we can't say you're not held to this promise. You're not held to your promise. Okay, and again, two things could happen. So if you did not get elected, maybe you did find some other way to reduce college tuition. Okay, so that would be true. But if you were not elected and you did not reduce college tuition, that we still consider that to be true because you're not held to your promise. Okay, so to summarize that, I think it helps to make a little table here for the if then. So if true, then true. So if you are elected and you meet your promise, that's true. If true, then false. If you are elected but you don't meet your promise, that's false. If you don't get elected but you do meet the promise somehow, some other way, that's true. If you're not elected, sorry, I may have misspoke. If you're not elected and you do meet your promise, that's true. If you're not elected and you don't meet your promise, that is also true because you weren't expected to meet your promise. So notice it's kind of a double negative here as well, as we were talking about in the last video. The entire statement is not false, so therefore we say it's true. Okay, so you'll get to practice these on the homework, and I'll see you in the next video.